Hello everyone, welcome to this video. Today we are going to be talking about seasonal care, and this is the second video in my series of 4 videos on seasonal care, and today we're going to be talking about summer. Alright, so what are some things that we need to be thinking about during the summer, and what's going on in our ponds in the summer? Alright, so as we come out of spring and the water starts getting warmer, the weather's getting warmer, our fish, our koi especially, are going to be spawning. They're going to be laying their eggs. And typically here in New Jersey, we're looking at that being sometime end of May into early June, just depending on the weather. But it is definitely a natural thing that happens every year in our koi ponds. It is quite stressful for the fish. They can do a lot of damage in the pond while they're laying their eggs. They're knocking over plants. They're scraping against rocks. It really gets pretty violent and pretty aggressive sometimes. But it is all natural, right? It's something that is naturally occurring, that fish have done for ages and ages and ages. Don't freak out about it. Everything will be okay. They survive. The pond might get really stinky and smelly for a little while after they lay their eggs. There's going to be a lot of white foam all over the surface of the pond. The only thing I can suggest that maybe you'd want to do is a couple times during all this whole process that's going on, maybe doing a couple water changes to try to keep things a little fresh. But it's nature, right? It's going to happen. It's normal. It's nothing that you really need to be concerned about, but just be aware, of what's going on. Okay. For koi, typically before they need to be mature before they start laying their eggs, and you're going to be looking at fish at least 12 to 14 inches, being that big before they'll actually start spawning. So smaller koi, you're not going to see this, but with larger koi and bigger ponds, definitely. But anyway, next subject. Feeding your fish, okay? You are definitely going to be feeding more in the summertime than you will be in the spring and in the fall. And we want to start feeding them a higher protein food, okay, which is going to push more growth, and the fish are going to be much more, physically active in the summer than in any other season. So to feed them a nice high protein foods, and push some growth on them. Some color enhancing foods will really help make their colors nice and vibrant. Check out my video on feeding your pond fish. I have a whole video on that. It gets into all kinds of stuff. But definitely our feeding is going to be the most in the summer. Our plants are going to be growing. We're going to want to put fertilizer tablets into our plants. And make sure to cut them back as they're growing and leaves are dying off of the plant, right? We want to be able to cut those dead leaves off so that they're not falling down in the pond and rotting and creating more waste in the pond. It's easier to keep it cleaner that way. Now, summer is also a great time to add your tropical plants, okay? Maybe like in early mid-June, we can start adding our tropical plants here. Plants like water hyacinths, water lettuce, tropical water lilies, right? And these plants will grow extremely fast, in those hot summer days. So while they are tropical and they don't survive all year and they won't come back next year, you will get an incredible amount of growth out of them out of 1 year. So it's kind of worth it to have these plants in your pond. And they provide a lot of shade on the surface as well, which helps to keep the water a little bit cooler, right? And it helps to cut down some of the algae growth by blocking the sunlight from penetrating into the water. While we're talking about algae, right, if you do not have a UV light, this is the time of year when your pond can turn to pea soup, because the fish are eating, their metabolism is in full force, and they're generating a lot of waste. This waste is putting nutrients in the water for the algae to feed on. We've got hot sun, right, warm water, and a lot of nutrients, so algae can grow very quickly in the summer. UV light will keep your water clear, but it will not kill the algae growing on your rocks and waterfall and anything else, because that is not exposed to the UV, okay? So, what do we do for all the algae growth on our rocks? Well, we can add some salt in our pond, okay? Some salt at lower levels, you know, can help control some of the algae. Algae that's growing on your waterfall is always an issue, okay? Because you have the sun beating down, warming up these rocks where all the water and nutrients are flowing over, okay? So it's best to just once in a while physically remove any kind of hairy, stringy algae that's growing on your waterfall as much as you can. It can be power washed real quick. Just don't let it get to the point where it's so thick and heavy on there that, you know, it becomes a real maintenance issue, okay? Another little trick I tell my clients is that on a hot summer day, maybe in the afternoon, for an hour or two, just shut your waterfall off. And just let that hot sun bake on those rocks and dry up any algae that's growing on there. And it's just an hour or two, maybe once a week, and it'll really help to control the amount of algae growth, you know, you'll get on your waterfall. Don't shut it off too long, because that's going to bring me to my next point, is aeration, okay? And aeration is critical in the ponds in the summer. So while shutting off a waterfall for an hour or two might not be, you know, too bad, as long as, maybe especially if we have another air pump or air system, or we have some other source of aeration in our pond, we don't need to worry about it at all. We can shut our waterfalls off and let that algae dry up, you know, for a little while. But as the water temperature warms, it holds less and less oxygen. And your fish are the most active. Their metabolisms are at their peak right now. So they require a lot of oxygen, okay, because they're really active. So we need to make sure that, especially on these hot spells in the summer, that we have plenty of aeration in the pond. So keep those waterfalls running, okay? Make sure we have a nice water flow through the whole pond at this time. If we have a separate aeration system, or, you know, an air pump with air stones, it's a good idea to keep that running as well. Just depends on how much water and aeration we have coming down our waterfalls. If it's a quiet trickling little thing, we might want to add more aeration in the pond. If you've got Niagara Falls, it might not be, you know, as important to keep the air pump in it. But we can, I know for my systems, I have gravity-fed filter tanks. I can take my air stones out of the pond and actually just run them in the filter tanks and aerate my water through the filter tank. Yeah, aeration is really important in the summer. If your fish are starving for oxygen in the summer, they're going to be up at the surface gasping for air, and it's always going to be your biggest fish that die first, because they're going to have the highest oxygen requirement, you know, of all the fish. So something you really need to be aware of. Now, the depth of the water in the summer really helps, because the ground, the dirt underneath your pond liner, down deep, is cooler than the warm, hot air on the surface. So the pond, the dirt under the pond, will keep the water cooler on the bottom. So we need to circulate that as much as we can, and it really helps keep that pond overall cooler, okay? But definitely, you know, aeration is very, very important for the summer. All right, keep up with your filters. Like I said, your fish are going to be eating the most right now. Your plants are going to be growing the most. There's going to be the most waste occurring in your pond at this point. So we need to make sure that our filters are kept up and being kept clean so that everything functions properly. One little tip about air pumps. If you are going away on vacation, I strongly recommend that you put the air pump or some kind of aeration into your pond, separate than, you know, your waterfalls or something. Okay, let's get an air system and put those air stones in the pond and make sure they're providing a good amount of oxygen. All right, a good amount of air. You want to see a nice boil on the surface where these air bubbles are coming up. If you're going away on vacation, I always recommend to put the air pumps in the pond, simply because if there should be a problem with your main pump, your main filter system, and you're away and it shuts down, you have no air in your pond. Okay, and you're going to come back from vacation and find all those fish dead. So what I really recommend doing is getting an extension cord, running an air pump to your pond from another outlet, hopefully another circuit breaker. So if there is a problem with your pump, you know, while you're away, and that pump overheats or burns out or whatever and trips the circuit breaker, maybe there's a strong storm, you know, thunder, lightning storm, and it trips the breaker on your pump, and the pump doesn't restart, well, you're going to have no air in your pond. So if it pump trips that breaker, I want my air pump on a separate breaker coming from somewhere else that'll aerate my pond. So I know that that'll be running if there's an emergency. Okay? Just a little trick. Keep in mind if you're going away. All right? So that's summer. Everything's in full force. This is the time to get out there and really enjoy our ponds. It's nice at night. Go out by the pond and it gets a little cooler. Sit and relax, read the paper, have a glass of wine, enjoy your pond, and it doesn't get any better. All right? Great. Thank you for checking it out. Today's video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see a lot more videos and learn a lot more about your pond and what's going on and how to understand things and why and where and when and how. We're going to be talking about so much stuff. So please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And we'll see you again in the next video. Take care.